Ladies and gents, hello and welcome back to another video. In front of me here are two packages, and inside of these should be an assortment of iPhone 5Cs. We've got this here, I believe this has one or two, and then this one's quite a bit heavier. I think maybe there's 4 or 5 iPhones in here. They should all be running iOS 7. That's the reason I picked them up. So let's get these opened up, see what kind of condition they're in, and hopefully we have ourselves a handful of iPhone 5Cs that have never been updated. Let's begin. All right, here we go. There are 5 iPhone 5Cs here. We have a pink one, which is in pretty nice condition. We've got 2 blue models. The first one here's got a pretty big scratch there on the display, and the back's in decent condition as well. We've got a green one here. This one's actually pretty nice condition. The back is basically flawless. Really clean iPhone 5C there. Our second blue one does have basically a perfect display. That is super cool to see. And the back of this phone is in very nice condition as well. And then last, we have the yellow 5C with, once again, a really nice looking display and a very nice yellow plastic rear. Now, the condition is not why I bought them, but it certainly does not hurt. The reason I got these is because they should all be running iOS 7, and we're going to find out if that's the case. And it looks like it is, just based on the home screen here. We've got the passbook icon with just 3 rows on all of our iPhone 5Cs. Now, we do have something different here. The home screen layout seems to be different on a few of these, but let's head into settings here on each of these devices and see which version of iOS we have, as well as which capacity we have on these devices. So we got a 16 gigabyte on 7.0.3 on that pink 5C. On the first blue one here, we are looking at 7.1.2. Once again, that is a 16 gig model. Our yellow iPhone 5C is going to be running iOS 7.1.1, another 16 gig model. The other blue iPhone 5C is going to have iOS 7.1. That's kind of rare. Usually don't see 7.1, another 16 gig model. And then our yellow 5C here has iOS 7.1.2, and this is a 32 gig model, so that's pretty cool to see that we got a 32. So 4 16 gigabytes and 1 32. They are all running iOS 7. Probably the coolest version here is going to be that 7.0.3. There's really not a whole lot of differences, but one thing that's neat is going to be the slide to power off. That gives us the squared logo there, which just looks so clean. I wish Apple had kept it. Instead, they went to this rounded one, which is kind of what we still see today. I think this squared off one looks a little better, and it is reminiscent of the early versions of iOS 7. I forget when it was removed or when it was switched to this one here, but it did not stick around for very long. Now, the iPhone 5C is a little interesting. It was Apple's first attempt at a budget smartphone. Typically in the past, what they would do is when they launched the new iPhone for that year, they would drop the price of the old one. However, they did not do that here in 2013 when the 5S and the 5C came out. Instead of dropping the iPhone 5 to that $99 mark with a 2-year contract, they introduced a new model, and that's the iPhone 5C, and they completely discontinued the iPhone 5. So this marked the first time that Apple had a new iPhone for their mid-tier lineup. Typically, they had 3 models. They had the flagship, then they had the year prior, and then they had one that was 2 years old. So in this case, the iPhone 5S was the newest model. Then we had the 5C, and then the 4S was for sale, and that was $0 with a 2-year contract here in the United States. But the 5C was the first time Apple had introduced a new phone to fill that middle range. And how'd they do that? Well, they kept the exact same internals as the iPhone 5. It's got the same dual-core A6 processor, 1 gig of RAM. It's got the same 8 megapixel lens on the rear, and I think it's a 1.2 megapixel on the front. It might be a 0.3, I can't quite remember, but I believe it's 1.2. And it kept the same Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, LTE antennas. So everything on the inside stayed the same, but it's the outside where this phone looks different. Instead of the traditional metal finish, metal and glass that we saw with the 4 and the 4S, and then the 5 and the 5S, Apple went with an all plastic enclosure. And if you ask me, I think it looks really nice. The colors are kind of a pastel. So they aren't quite as bright as some of the newer iPhone models, but I think they look great, and it feels really nice to hold in your hand. There's just something about the way that this plastic is designed. It doesn't feel cheap. It feels very strong, very sturdy, and the rounded off design here really makes it easy to hold in your hand. My only complaint is that it does get a little bit slippery without a case on, because there's really no texture to this plastic. It's just a very shiny finish, as you can see it there reflecting in the light. Apple also decided to keep the fronts on these phones to black as the only option. So the iPhone 5, the 4S, the 4, and the 5S all had the option to have a white bezel on the front. The 5C took that away. You only got a black bezel, something we would actually see return with the second and third gen iPhone SE. Those you can get different colors on the back, but the front always stays black. So this phone was really overlooked because of the iPhone 5S, which brought many new features, such as that dual-core A7 chip with its 64-bit support, the first of its kind in the smartphone world, and the iPhone 5C sort of just flew under the radar. The only thing that made this special was the new design, the new colors, and I think Apple did that on purpose because the iPhone 5 looked so similar to the iPhone 5S. They wanted something to differentiate them. So they came out with the iPhone 5C with its plastic design. Now that said, it is a really nice device and it's really easy to use here on iOS 7. It flies through the apps, even though this was technically not the first version of iOS for the A6 processor, it still handles it flawlessly. And opening all these applications here, we're not connected to the Wi-Fi, but it is able to do that just fine, and multitasking is really not bad at all. Now, this phone came with iOS 7. It would get updates to iOS 8, 9, and 10, where it finishes its support, the exact same as the iPhone 5, except for no iOS 6 support. Although I have heard, perhaps with a jailbreak or some other tweaks, you can actually get iOS 6 installed on here because the hardware is essentially the same as the iPhone 5. Now, I believe there are some things that do not work, such as the touchscreen, because this touchscreen here is actually different than the iPhone 5. So while you can get iOS 6 on here, you really can't use it because you can't use a touchscreen. So maybe that's a fun project for another day, or perhaps one of you guys would be willing to do that and post a video on it. I would be interested to see that. Now I have almost every color here. We are missing the white iPhone 5C, and I think that might be the only one. There was green, red, blue, yellow, and white. I think those were the only color options. I wish they had come out with a black iPhone 5C. I think that would have looked really nice, very similar to the iPhone 3GS, but with the back casing being black and then the front being black as well. I think that would look super clean and it would have made a really nice iPhone. I don't know if anyone's ever made a custom iPhone 5C, but that would definitely be a cool project to make a black one. I would pay some serious money to have a mint condition black iPhone 5C. So if any of you guys out there are looking to make a quick buck or something, then put together a black iPhone 5C and send me a link to that thing on eBay, because I will buy that and make a video. I think that would be super clean. Apart from that, there's not really a whole lot to talk about because the iPhone 5C really doesn't give us anything new. The internals are the same as the iPhone 5. iOS 7 is a little bit less interesting on here compared to the iPhone 5S because we don't have things such as Touch ID or slow motion camera. But it's still a cool phone nonetheless, and it does hold a special place in Apple's history as kind of a one-off iPhone. They never used the name C again. I don't know if that stands for color. That would have to be my guess, the iPhone 5 color. Either way, I think it's a really cool device, and to get 5 of them here, all running iOS 7, that is pretty special. This has been a real treat to get these and go through them, especially in their mint condition. So I wish I had a white one here to complete the little rainbow, but nonetheless, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.